Hi guys, Paul here. Welcome back to the Anfield View. Yes, welcome back to our weekly roundup. I'll be honest, guys, the reason I haven't put up a video for the vast majority of this week, and I felt I would put one up really now, is basically, as you can probably see, literally nothing. Nothing's happening on the Liverpool front, pretty much. The very fact that we're discussing Amazon maybe being a potential minority investor with a consortium as maybe something that the club's exploring. We're really discussing really bits and bobs of the squad that are back over in America with an abundance of youth players. That's pretty much all she wrote, isn't it? I mean, what's the hold up? Answers on a postcard, isn't it? I honestly, we're nearly another week. It's Friday tomorrow. We're nearly another week down when basically next to nothing has happened on the transfer front. Well, basically nothing's happened on the transfer front. Literally, it's what 3 weeks since Muniz, and we're what, nearly 2 months into the transfer window, and we've got essentially a signing from January that was all done then, and we've got a signing in Victor Muniz, which was fine, but that pretty much got sped through because Newcastle are after him. It feels like we're only really going after half the time players that have got a release clause, which doesn't really, well, in one hand, sure, that's great if they're exceptional players, and I'm all for spotting a bargain, but we really seem to be struggling to get anything over the line that hasn't got a release clause at the moment. Yeah, yeah. Ultimately, I mean, look, it depends how much business the club. The problem is we're trying to read the club's mind in terms of a game of poker to some extent. We don't know really what the club's plans are in terms of how much they want to outlay, how much they can afford to outlay, how much of last year's outlay really impacted this year's. Because like I mentioned in a previous video, we're all working on the assumption that that free transfer windows in one was really making up from the three prior ones where we did absolutely nothing. But in reality, it feels does this transfer window count as one of those windows they're talking about? Maybe. Well, we're hardly moving mountains at the moment. We're being linked to Dear Monday. That's not happened. We're being linked to Barclay. Nothing's moving there. And I appreciate all you ever. I mean, you're hearing endless amounts of basically waffle. There's nothing really happening at the moment. There's no real. Oh yeah, but if this chip will fall and that chip will fall and this chip will fall and that chip will fall. It's like, in all fairness, whilst we're waiting around for what may or may not happen, other clubs are getting business done. And the thing is, it's all well and good saying, oh yeah, but none of the other clubs are doing phenomenal amounts of business. First of all, Man United aren't necessarily in the financial shape where they can spend 400 million. And equally, nor are we at the moment. We're not going to be spending 400 million this season. The second part to that is Man City and Arsenal don't need to spend as much as what we really need to outlay. You could make us, someone could say, yeah, but we don't need to spend. We did a massive spend last summer. Well, ultimately, our performance last year tells you we do. That at the end of the day, we still don't have anybody to replace Mo Salah, and I get the fact that okay, plan B, the new option is obviously very much for Sinisa to get the goals. I get that, but we still do need to have a decent right winger. I just what's really baffling me, and I've got a feeling, and I'll run through it. I got a feeling what I feel's happening. Um, I'm perplexed as to why we aren't sorting out the sort of smaller bodies, like maybe a defensive midfielder and a right back. I'm perplexed as to why there's any delay on those. They're not complicated deals to really get done. And my overarching view is we were spending way too much time focusing on one or two players for the marquee buy of the summer, which is the winger, or a lot of what we're planning to do is also linked to potentially outgoings, and because there's not people biting at the sales that we want to sell potentially. Is that sort of reducing the amount of money that we can or want? I wouldn't say can, what we want to outlay. Is that the truth? Is that really the reality? Is it a question that because we haven't been able to sell, behind the scenes what we wanted to sell to raise the funds that we wanted to raise, it's that is the pure reason why we haven't gone out and spent quickly? Maybe it wouldn't be, but it wouldn't be the first time, would it really? Because obviously last year, for one of the few times last year where we purchased a lot up front before we started doing a fire sale, whereas this year it feels very much like, well, we've hardly really spent anything. Let's be honest, and we just hit a roadblock of absolutely nothing happening. So what is the hold up? As I say, I think it's very much linked to potential outgoings. Even though from a pure squad depth perspective, there's nobody that can argue our squad has enough players. Even the managers said we don't have enough players. And so if the manager's saying it, every single fan that's got any sort of knowledge is saying it. Every independent pundit is saying it. There isn't anybody that isn't saying we don't have enough players. And so we're not really sort of reinventing the wheel by really highlighting that fact. Why aren't we moving quickly? I just don't know. I generally don't know. Is it a situation that the complications with Edwards, and was Edwards far more involved in transfers than we thought? Maybe. Is it a question of that Richard Hughes has been completely distracted by the fact he's leaving? Maybe. Is it both, is it just purely an administration problem behind the scenes in terms of who's really doing it? Maybe. Is it the fact that we planned for one thing under Slot and the fact that Slot obviously underperformed meant that we suddenly had to rip those plans up? Maybe. Is it a quite my argument to some of these factors would be though that regardless of who the manager is, we should have a complete data analysis, which we do. I don't believe we don't. We should have a complete data analysis and breakdown on all defensive midfielders, all right backs, all people that have the buyout clause, all of these key factors, all of the wingers that are available, and what prices, and all these different things. So there's a lot of people earning some very good money and very good wages and doing great jobs that would have collated a database within the club that has all of this information to hand. So regardless of who the manager is, they've got all this information to draw upon. So what the delay is, honestly, I'm scratching my head. I really am scratching my head. I mean, we've had this week where look, and I'm all for supporting. I'm keen to see how the youth players play in friendlies, absolutely. But equally, that even if they won 10-0 on the weekend, yes, I would like to see some good performances. But equally, that still doesn't stop the fact that we need to make urgent buys. And it's very easy to sit and go, yeah, Paul, you've got another month. You've got another month. That's loads of times. Like in theory, it is, but in a month's time, we will also be playing our first game. We're playing our first game with players. I heard that today that Victor Munoz may not even be ready for the first game. But Alisson and Virgil will just about be ready, and Gakpo's away obviously due to the sad personal circumstances, and so it's like we've already got a small squad as it is, I'm not sitting here saying, and like obviously the tragic scenario obviously for Gakpo, but I'm saying that the club can't afford to be this. I don't want to say lackadaisical because that would be wrong. I don't afford it cannot afford to be this ponderous. And someone could say, "Oh, it's very easy to say. It's a lot harder to do." I was like, "Yeah, but that's what they're being paid to do." I'm not being paid. The whole objective is to put the squad together for the manager, and so far, we're not. So far, we're failing Iriola. The moment he's just got one person from January, which is a youth centre back, which we obviously hope he comes good, but that's it. And he's got a good bargain buy, in Nunes, but nothing obviously that reinvents the wheel. We hope he obviously does. But we're hardly really, giving Iriola our backing, are we? So yeah, it'd be great to hear your thoughts, guys. We're going to chase down those 100 subscribers. I hate talking about it; it's not really my thing, but it'd be great if you could subscribe and like and hype and all that jazz, and try and build the channel for us, guys. It'll be wonderful on that front. So, yeah, what are your thoughts? Well, yeah, what are your thoughts on the potential, well, new investment, as we say, because it would be a minority, and then would that minority then move across to similar to sort of Man United with Ineos? Maybe it is the start of a slow exit to some degree of FSG. Only time will tell, really. I mean, what will be more interesting is to see how much gets invested and what percentage, because then that will give you a clear indicator as to what the actual overall valuation of the club is as well. Look, I'm not surprised. Will we see the light of that money to be pumped into a transfer window? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I imagine. I mean, usually when we seek funds, it's for a big rebuild. Well, we haven't got any of that anymore. So literally, if there is an investment, it's either going to go to FSG, as they're obviously the ones selling the shares, or it will be put into the squad. It really isn't anything else for it to go into. Basis, there's no debt, there's nothing, no infrastructure to be built. There's no, it can only be the squad, or it can only be FSG. Like people like, obviously FSG is really sort of cashing out to some extent on a proportion of obviously that investment. So not much more to really discuss in terms of the week. We've obviously got the rumor in terms of that potential investment. Time will tell what that actually equals to. I mean, it'll be interesting, as I say, to see the valuation. Nothing really happened in terms of transfer, literally zero. A whole lot of waffle, and I still keep an eye on everything that's happening, and pretty much nothing's moved at all. You know, and so I would rather put a video up for you, sort of highlighting the week, really, than put one up every single. Yeah, and everyone's entitled to do what they want to do, but rather than put something up every single day when basically nothing's happening, literally nothing is happening, on that front. Yeah, maybe the highlight is obviously seeing Bajcetic back in training. I would suppose, and there's obviously fingers and toes and everything else you can cross, for him to be fit. There's going to be a mad rush with Liverpool in terms of incomings and probably outgoings. We've got 1 month, about a month, and there's going to be a whole heap going on because we haven't done anywhere near enough at the moment. And ultimately, our business is to look after ourselves. It isn't to be comparing to everybody else because what sometimes people lose perspective is the fact that we were dreadful last year, and you can put all of that on the manager or circumstances and all these different things. But the reality is it wasn't just honestly, it wasn't just circumstances. There was a major drop off from player performance, and you can't if it makes you sleep better at night, putting all the blame on that. And that you can cope with the fact that you think our squad's relatively okay at the moment, then fair be. For me, I saw way too many holes. I'm not convinced keeping McAllister around is the greatest thing. Equally, not because I don't like the player, but because unless we get a defensive midfielder, I just don't see how it can work. He isn't going to get any fitter. He isn't going to get any faster. And so what is the solution to nobody seems to care really. It seems to be everyone's just like, oh well, we'll just shove Gravenberch back there and hope Gravenberch can suddenly be a defensive midfielder again. I was like, well, he never was. He was a makeshift. When we won the title, I was like, oh, he played really well. Yeah, he did play really well, but not in the sense that this version of the team needs. This version of the team needs a defensive midfielder. The defence is younger, more inexperienced, and a lot older in Virgil's case. It needs that defensive midfielder to help them out. It doesn't need a technical midfielder, like that can sort of get the ball turned and move it forward. It's like that transitional play, and that's all fine and dandy. But this version of Liverpool, it's going to have a young centre back, whether it's Leone or Xhaka. It's going to have an old centre back in Virgil. It's going to have Kirkes. It's going to have whoever on the right side, and an aged Alisson. It needs a defensive midfielder to help it. And I think people are just burying their head in the sand, thinking that, oh well, well, Szoboszlai's not a defensive midfielder. McAllister hasn't got the legs, and that's not his game either. And it's not Gravenberch's fundamental game to be that person. Look, if I knew who the next Fabinho was, I'd be picking up the phone to the club now and telling them. I don't know who that player is. That's their job to obviously go and scout that player. But I generally do believe that really should be our priority. Be great to hear your thoughts, guys. What is the hold up? There's your emoji. What is the hold up? Answers on the postcard or in the comments if you want, guys. As I said, I'm trying to run through as much as I can for the week. Not really anything else to really write about for you guys, but rather than sort of waffle on and just put a video for 40 odd minutes, I thought I wanted to give you a synopsis, my general thoughts of the week. It is disappointing. I'm not going to lie. I expected it some degree of urgency at some point, and it just the train seems to be very much parked at the station. And if it has left the station, it's moving incredibly slowly. On that front, guys. So you enjoy the rest of your Thursday and into the week. Look forward to hearing your thoughts. Please subscribe, like, hype, all that jazz, and you have a fantastic weekend. Speak to you more soon.